I just fired up Arc Raiders. They're doing a server slam prior to release, and I know really nothing about this game, but we're going to test out its performance. And to talk about that, let's also talk about the system requirements for the game. So the minimum system requirements look extremely low, a processor being Intel Core i5 6600K or Ryzen 5 1600. Those are very old CPUs, with only 12 gigabytes of system RAM, that's not VRAM required, and saying that you'd be good with a GTX 1050 Ti or AMD Radeon RX 580 or Intel Arc A380. That is not asking a lot. Whereas the recommended does step things up, but the processor is still i5 9600K or Ryzen 5 3600. A Ryzen 5 3600 is similar overall gaming performance to something like what you would see in a PS5 or a Series X console. 16 gigabytes of system memory, and then the GPUs they're recommending are an RTX 2070, Radeon RX 5700 XT, or Intel Arc B570. Now, I don't have a 2070 right now, but I do have an RTX 3060, which has more VRAM, but is in a very similar performance ballpark. This is the Tech Power Up relative performance chart. Also gives you a rough idea of where your GPU might fall if it's somewhere in this ballpark. We can also test out other hardware, but let's go ahead and start with this. So switching back into the game, I will say that this is just, I fired up the game and it immediately puts you here after a little intro cinematic. Now, one thing I want to look at is what graphic settings did it actually default to on this hardware. So it's looking like, by the way, I'm on a 1440p display, but we can also switch over to 1080p if we want to test that out as well. Looking like it is trying to output at a 1440p output, but looks like it is defaulting to using some DLSS upscaling. Looks like it's defaulted to the CNN model. The Transformer model is the newer model that looks better, the DLSS 4 model, and don't confuse any of this with frame generation. Looks like we are not using frame generation. The 30 series GPUs from NVIDIA don't have NVIDIA frame gen compatibility, but could work with AMD frame gen. Looks like you could kick it on here, but it is defaulting to off. And the DLSS upscaling resolution seems to be set to auto, which by this grayed out render resolution appears to be 67% per axis. So that would be equivalent to the quality setting. So it's looking like we're on DLSS quality. So if I just set this to quality, notice that it hits that same internal rendering resolution. DLSS quality on a 1440p output generally looks pretty good. Looks like overall it has defaulted to motion blur on. I'm going to go ahead and keep that on just to trigger you. Yeah, you. Anyway, looks like, interestingly, it has defaulted to ray tracing being on using some RTX global illumination, although defaulting to the low setting. It says dynamic set to low. Looks like RTX GI traces more and more rays. If you increase it, dynamic presets use real-time ray tracing to update bounce lighting as lighting and environmental changes happen. Anyway. So it's saying that higher ones would have a major impact to performance, which generally tends to be the case. And it looks like overall it has defaulted to the medium settings across the board. And hey, there's an in-game performance overlay. Let's go ahead and see what that looks like. So it looks like top right corner, you can get FPS, or you can get a more detailed one with FPS, frame times, CPU, game render time, GPU time. That's all good stuff. I'm also going to be using my overlay off the side here, which I think is at least a larger font, might be easier to see. And I like that it presents the frame times in a graph, and I can average things over a certain amount of time. Anyway, let's go ahead and play the game a bit. Right now, performance seems absolutely solid, especially considering there is at least some level of ray tracing enabled. But one thing we're going to have to figure out is, like, do other parts of the game have, more demanding performance, and also, like, on the CPU or the GPU? So you can see all of my CPU cores. Looks like it's mentioning we could loot things, so I'm probably meant to be looting this car. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, if we are, that's a little bit loud. Let's go ahead and also mention that I may cut sections of this video for editing if, like, things seem to be pretty boring. So anyway, here we are. Let's look like we could get some bullet. We already have bullets in our backpack. Where's the container? Here's the, oh good, my stats are gonna cover up the loot. And I'm pretty sure this is one of those games where you kind of looting around. Is this an extraction shooter? I really haven't followed this game. I know that it's from the developers, I think, of the Finals, right? Which was another game that just kind of like, I was playing other stuff at the time. Anyway, so we'll have to see what I think of the game, but this is mostly a performance review. Is there stuff I can get here? Can I crouch? Looks like we can. Looks like left control, or it looks like C also works. I prefer C to crouch, so anyway. Looks like we've got some simple gun parts. Look at us go. All right, let's go ahead and keep on running. Overall performance in this area, at least, is feeling totally solid. By the way, note that if the frame rate if the gameplay looks choppy to you, I'm capturing externally on a HDMI capture card, which is a 60 FPS, not variable refresh rate capture. So you should be looking at the frame time graph to judge the smoothness. The frame time graph overall looks pretty solid here. I haven't noticed anything in person feeling choppy or anything, and the overall frame rate of 100 FPS looks pretty good. I'll let you know if I'm feeling anything choppy, and we can also reference, like I said, the frame time graph to get a good idea for how that's going. So yeah, overall, things are seeming very solid here. But like I said, this is kind of an intro area. Ooh, big frame time spike there. I felt that one, and you can see it on the frame time graph. And I think that may have been when I initially kicked on the flashlight. So that, to me, looks like shader compilation stutter. So shader compilation stutter happens when a shader that the game needs to run was not pre-compiled before launching the game. Looks like we've got to breach this door. Let's see how it goes. And okay, I'm getting shot at, but it's like a cutscene, so there's nothing I can really do about that. And all right, we'll kind of see how the cutscene goes. It doesn't seem to be any kind of frame rate cap or anything. Sometimes cutscenes in some games like lock you to 30 FPS. That did not seem to be the case on that. I'll see the graphics right now look weirdly twitchy. Would you guys agree? Like the backpack's kind of like twitching randomly. That seems a little bit odd. Has it sort of settled down now? Seems like it's settled down now. So that looked a little bit weird. The top side is full of dangers. You need to recover your health to make it back to safety. So, okay, how will I recover my health? Am I supposed to be finding a med kit here or something, or am I just going? Crouching lets you move through stuff. Okay, I can crouch to slide, looks like, as well. Healing items can be equipped through the quick wheel. Hold Q. Okay, healing item. Okay. And then, okay, so I've equipped it. Now, okay, left click to heal self. Got it. Looks like a hold down the button to do that. And health has improved, but not all the way. Let's search some things. Sterilized bandages. A light shield. Do I have to use a shield, or does that just like automatically happen? That's a good question. Can I right click it? Do I have to do anything? I don't know. So, okay, it looks like I just have a shield. There's like a blue line above my health bar now. While sprinting, you can use the crouch input to enter a slide. This looks like hold. Don't need to double tap or anything. That seems like I heard something. It seems scary. Okay, knocked out raiders may carry valuable loot or gear, but approach with caution. Okay. Looks like I don't have any weapons at the moment. Okay, but here is a weapon, so it's giving me the things I need. Medium ammo. Okay, stronger shields. Bloated tuna can. That sounds delicious. All right, some grenade stuff, whatever. The point is, we do seem to have a weapon now. I'm hoping it will now tell me how to equip the weapon. Do I just press number 1? Okay, pressed number 1. That seemed to do the trick. Looks like we have 18 bullets loaded out of 73 in the backpack. Seems like good stuff. Yeah, performance so far seems absolutely solid. Like, I want to keep playing to see if things get worse, because this is very clearly like an intro tutorial section. Vaulting, just spacebar to vault, seems pretty standard stuff so far. Looks like we can vault up here. Use the panel to call a cargo elevator. This panel, I'm assuming, is what we're talking about here. All right. Yeah, man, performance seems absolutely solid. I'm actually going to try out... let's go ahead and switch to the DLSS transformer model, Generally takes a little more performance, but also generally has a little better image quality. Not that it looked bad before anything, and you can judge, but I would say things to my eye seem just a little bit sharper here. So we're going to switch over to that transformer model. Again, performance might be a little bit lower now here. We seem to be in the 80s instead of in the 90s. I think that'd be worth it. Am I supposed to kill that thing? What am I doing? I didn't pay any attention to what I'm supposed to be doing right now, if I'm being honest. Use the computer inside the elevator to get to safety. Okay. I'm using the computer inside the elevator. Hopefully I then get... Oh no, did I cancel it because I looked too far? So I don't need to hold it down. I just need to let it do its thing. Am I going to get shot? I'm going to get shot, aren't I? Okay, the little shield thing seems to have helped. Okay, we're good. We're good. All right. So I would say that initial section performed extremely well. The only concern I had was that one frame time blip when we activated the flashlight, which did seem like a shader compilation thing. Now, let's see. I'm going to go ahead and skip over the cutscenes. Okay, so now we're like changing our character appearance and all that. Probably don't need to film this section, and we'll get into some more gameplay. All right, I've launched into an actual mission, I think. Again, my understanding of this type of game is that there could be other players, and that they could kill me and take my stuff. I don't know if there's any additional tutorial bits before we get that. Okay, graphically, I'm noticing a bit of pop-in. Again, we are on the medium settings, so notice as I back up, we're seeing some stuff kind of disappear as I push in closer. And it is to the point where it's a bit distracting. Like, it's interesting how this grows out. Like look right here. It's interesting how this grows out of the ground. I don't know. I feel like I might find it less distracting if that just like, well, I don't know. Would it be more distracting if it just popped into existence, or is it like the delayed, like just slow rise out of the ground a little bit more distracting to you guys? I don't know. It just looks a little, something about it looks a little odd to me. Performance-wise, we're kind of in the mid 80s. So yeah, that's the biggest thing that I'm noticing here is the pop-in. So that's certainly distracting, but the overall performance numbers look fairly solid. Now, I'm not sure how far, I need to play to get an idea of how performance is going to look. It's looking like at these medium settings, we're probably going to do okay. But that the graphics, especially, like I said, the draw distance on things is certainly kind of explaining why I think we're getting decent performance on this hardware. So I think it might make sense at this point to actually turn the graphics settings up a bit and then see if things look better and still perform well. Again, we're on the quality level DLSS on the 1440p output. Let's go ahead and just kick the overall quality level up and see what happens. So we're going up to high, and you can see a lot of stuff apply. Some games need a full restart to completely apply settings. Some don't. It certainly applied most of them. And it looks like we are now in kind of the lower 70s or so. I'm going to run around a bit, and I want to see if that pop-in is quite as distracting now as it was before. I mean, you can certainly still see things drawing in as you go, but it's maybe less distracting than it was. Performance, like I said, lower, but still decent. Let's see where we're at if we still see some, branches climbing up out of the ground as we move forward. Certainly seem to be different branches now that we're on the the medium settings. So, on the high settings rather than medium. So that's definitely interesting. I'm going to go ahead and push things up again until we're maybe not getting good performance, and kind of see how that goes. Or maybe we'll just keep getting good performance. We could, of course, push up ray tracing stuff, but right now it's not the lighting that's really I'm finding distracting. It's the it's the pop-in. So I'm curious if up here at the epic settings, if things are going to draw out at a much longer distance. So moving forward, yeah, I mean, I can see the foliage change, or maybe it starts to get more shadowing as I get a bit closer. But yeah, this certainly looks a lot more stable in motion. I'm not finding the pop-in to be anywhere near as distracting. Performance is certainly taking a hit, though. We are in the upper 50s, which is playable. If this is the kind of game where, like, competitive reaction times and things are a big deal, I might suffer the worst pop-in to get some better performance. But I do think things certainly look a lot more stable now. Of course, this isn't a video where I'm going to get into like detailed optimized settings guide or anything, but I think you could probably keep up things that are related to draw distance to avoid kind of the pop-in, and maybe keep other things down to keep the performance numbers up. I'm hearing gunshots, so there's probably somebody out here who's going to just run up and kill me, but there's that. Yeah, anyway, we're around 60 FPS though. And again, at the epic settings, I do think things are now looking pretty solid. So good stuff on all that. The yeah, there's definitely still some pop in on, like, I noticed that like okay, that like just pops into existence as I get there. So other than that though, I think graphics look fine, especially if this is more about the gameplay than the graphics. And it's nice that there is a lot of scalability available. Seems like the 3060 user is certainly going to be able to play the game just fine. VRAM does not seem to be anywhere near 12 gigabytes, which is what this card has, or even 8 gigabytes. So there's that. Now, I am curious if we were playing at 1080p resolution, what the results would be like. But again, we're already rendering a bit lower here. But here, I can pull this down to a 1080p output. It's still, but then we can turn. Let's go with DLSS off, or just no anti-aliasing entirely. Okay, guys, I know there's the like FTAA subreddit who says that things just look better with no anti-aliasing, or at least no TAA. You need some kind of anti-aliasing, guys. Do you really find that this looks better? Like, it looks so shimmery and distracting. I guess some people just really like things to look crisp. And I mean, I can see the edge of every single pixel, so maybe like things to look crisp. Anyway, I would prefer some kind of anti-aliasing treatment. And again, like things like DLAA can provide a really good anti-aliasing treatment. So if we took like DLSS but went up to native resolution with DLAA, it's a pretty costly anti-aliasing solution. But things are no longer quite so pixelated looking to me, so that's nice. We're getting close to 60-ish FPS at, looks like at 1080p native. Again, these are the epic settings. Certainly not fully locked to 60 though. We're kind of bouncing between 50 and 60. And all of that. Frame time graph, not completely smooth either, but it's not disastrous. And I think I'd like to actually try out some even weaker hardware since the 3060 is doing so well, and because the system requirements, if I pop back over to those, do mention a 1050 Ti as the minimum. So I actually don't even have a 1050 Ti. The weakest GPU I have is a 1060, but I think that would be worth testing. So I'm going to go ahead and pop that in and see how it does. All right, we are now on the GTX 1060. So this is going on a decade-old GPU at this point, was kind of mid-range at the time, and we're getting around 100 FPS. That being said, I think the default settings look like they're extremely upscaled, so let's take a look at the graphic settings. So to be clear, I've switched to 1080p output. We're just shooting for 1080p on this card. And it looks like, yeah, it does have FSR upscaling kicking on right now at the balanced settings, which on a 1080p output is actually looking like 59% per axis resolution. Although, wait a second, whoa, it's actually worse. Okay, I was gonna say this actually looked worse than that. Okay, so actually we were at 1080p output, but it's also reduced it to 75%, meaning it's actually only targeting 812p output, and then getting a 480p internal resolution off that using balanced upscaling. So I think what we're gonna do is, first of all, get back to 100% of 1080p output. That's that. And then we're also gonna go ahead and turn off upscaling for a second. This would just be no AA at all. So let's just look at just 1080p raw, no anti-aliasing of any kind. And we are still around 60 FPS, maybe even 70. But again, I think we should kick on some AA. But not only that, we are also on the lowest settings. So graphic settings wise, it's also important to note that the ray tracing is now just disabled because we're on a GTX card. These don't have hardware accelerated ray tracing. So the global illumination is going to have to be using some kind of software fallback and not using any hardware based ray tracing for the GI. Also, everything here is on the low settings, and that's where we're at. So we're at low settings, native 1080p. Now let's go ahead and kick on some kind of anti-aliasing, like at least a little bit of TAA, and see what that gets us. Performance actually increased. That's a bit odd. Did that actually kick on some sort of upscaling? Let's go ahead and double check on that. Okay, yeah, it went to auto resolution scaling. So yeah, it's at 73%. Can we just get to some native rendering resolution? Why don't we try TSR? Can we set it to, I guess we can just go to manual and set it to 100%. Let's do that. So manually set it to 100% resolution. Okay, we are now actually at native 1080p using TSR, which is the built-in Unreal Engine scaling. And looks like we're around 50 FPS or so. Looks like there's a bit of stormy weather going on that we weren't getting on the 3060. Let's go ahead and compare this if I now actually use the TAAU, but then set it to 100% resolution. Sometimes that's more performant than TSR, because it's a little bit of a less advanced anti-aliasing. Yeah, that gets us a little more performance. So we're now into the 60s. So why don't we run around like this for a bit and just kind of see how this goes. So low settings, 1080p native resolution using the TAA for anti-aliasing, but not upscaling. Looks like that kind of gets us into the mid 60s or so here. And that means we're totally playable on the 1060. I understand why the minimum system requirements do actually say a 1050 Ti. Seems like you could actually target 1050 Ti in this game, either playing below 60 FPS or just playing below a native 1080p resolution. And I think it'd be all right. It also doesn't seem like the CPU is doing anything crazy here. To reach 60 FPS. So while my Ryzen 5 5600X is above the minimum and even recommended CPU, certainly seems like there's room to scale lower on the CPU side of things and be okay. Now, I definitely should mention that this is not an extensive playtest of the game, so it is very likely that there are more demanding situations than what we're doing here. So it's I would expect there to be areas that perform worse than this, but oftentimes, open areas with foliage and things like that tend to be some of the more demanding areas of games, but getting a bunch of players on screen and things like that, could do something. But obviously, I don't have massive amounts of time to test massive amounts of locations on each GPU here, but it's looking like we could at least deem this playable on the 1060, which is pretty impressive because native resolution over 60 FPS, at least in this area, gives us some headroom for dips and still being playable. Again, it definitely turned off most of the vegetation. We don't have the RTGI or anything, but I mean, it looks fine enough considering we're playing on decade-old hardware at this point. I think now it would make sense to maybe do the opposite extreme and take a look at what this game does on a super high-end system. All right, we are now on a 9800X 3D CPU paired with an RTX 5090, so we're basically on the most powerful gaming PC money can currently buy, and it looks like that's getting us 170-ish frames per second in this area I seem to have spawned into. Interesting, last couple of times it had me come out of a tunnel, and now this time it just spawned me at this base. But anyway, I can definitely tell the graphic settings are a lot higher, but let's go ahead and see what they are. Are we running at native resolution? I'm on a 4K display, so it looks like it has defaulted to DLSS on. We're going for a 4K output, but looks like it has defaulted to the CNN model, not the transformer model, and at a 50% per axis resolution. So that would be DLSS performance mode, which is internally rendering at 1080p. but it does look like it has the ray tracing global illumination up at the epic preset, so much higher than it defaulted to on the 3060. And then it looks like everything is just overall at the epic settings. We go ahead and turn on these performance numbers because why not? Okay, so looks like you can crank everything up, DLSS performance, get high frame rate, but I'm also curious, what if we go ahead and try, and also to be clear, frame generation is off. What if we go ahead and turn to DLAA, meaning we're going to go to native resolution using DLSS as a high-quality anti-aliasing. Let's also switch over to the newer transformer model, which in most games looks better. Occasionally, I've seen games where it's kind of bugged out a little bit. Okay, so this is good to see. The 5090, even at native 4K resolution max settings, even with DLAA, which is a very heavy anti-aliasing, is hitting 100 frames per second at maxed out 4K. Again, there may be areas of the game that are more demanding than this, but this leaves a lot of headroom to dip and still have reasonable performance. Again, judge the smoothness by the frame time graph, and the frame time graph is looking smooth here. Minor blips, but nothing crazy. Now, there's always the question of like, am I going to hit a shader compilation somewhere like we randomly did on the flashlight on the 3060 at the very beginning? It's certainly possible, but I'm not seeing anything particularly egregious right here. And I'm not sure I'm going to get anything too interesting out of testing the 5090 because, as we can see, 100 FPS maxed out native 4K, even with all the ray tracing kicked up. And honestly, the game looks pretty nice maxed out. Nothing, pushing the boundaries beyond visuals I've seen anywhere else, but also don't see anything particularly to complain about. Looks like up at the maximum settings, I'm not seeing a lot of the pop-in and stuff that you see at the lower settings. Not saying there's none, but it's looking pretty solid here. And there's that. So I'm really like, yeah, we could kick on frame generation. We could go DLSS. Like I said, we could go performance mode DLSS with the transformer model and kick on frame generation. Let's go 4x frame gen with DLSS performance. And now look, yay, I've got a gigantic number. It's 400 and something frames per second. But then keep in mind that some of that is just frame interpolation. Now, given that the base frame rate is already high, I'm not feeling a lot of latency, and the overall responsiveness is pretty good. We've got enough of a high frame rate that I'm not noticing any obvious image quality artifacts. So, of course, you can just push things to crazy high numbers, kicking all those features on together. I think it's going to be more interesting to test out a more mid-range but modern GPU. So maybe I'll kick in like a 5060 Ti. All right, we're now on the RTX 5060 Ti. I have the 16 gigabyte version here, but judging by the GPU memory usage, it's not going to be an issue on 8 gigabyte cards, at least on anything I'm seeing so far on this map. And let's take a look at the performance numbers. Looks like we're close to 90 FPS, but let's also look at the graphics settings. So graphics settings here, we got frame gen turned off, DLSS quality, so we're not native res at this point. 1440p is what I set the monitor to here. And it looks like it is at maximum setting still. So we're epic across the board, including the ray traced global illumination. So maximum settings, DLSS quality, 1440p output, frame generation is currently turned off. And it does look like we are kind of in the 80 to 90 FPS range. We've got a lot of foliage here. There's smoke on screen. These are things that tend to be difficult for games. And yet we are getting pretty solid performance here. Again, 5060 Ti, new GPU, not like totally inexpensive or anything, but also certainly not the highest end card in the stack. And we are doing 1440p output here. Let's switch it to native res by going to DLAA though, and see how that does. So it's looking like native 1440p with DLAA, which is a heavy anti-aliaser. We're looking at like kind of in the 60-something FPS range. I'm guessing the most demanding scenes would probably dip a little below 60, but completely playable. And again, that is at a native 1440p output. and rendering resolution. So good stuff. And that's with the transformer model. Seems completely reasonable. I think even going as far as DLSS balanced on a 1440p output with the newer transformer model tends to look pretty good. And if we do that, we are around, looks like 100 FPS or so in at least this area. So cool stuff. Honestly, I've got to say, I'm not sure we really need to test this game out anymore. It's looking like if you are on a newer card, you can run the game at max or near max settings with decent performance. Native res 1440p, you know, looking like we were getting solid performance, but using DLSS allows us to get triple digits while keeping everything else maxed out. Obviously, we could turn graphic settings down if we wanted to stay at native resolution and get a higher frame rate. My main thought is that it looks like when you scale down the graphic settings, there does get to be a lot of pop-in, which can be a bit distracting. But the game was completely playable as low as a GTX 1060 on the low settings, so I do like that it lets you go to a kind of a potato mode for performance. I am in combat now. How dare they make me actually play the game while I'm talking? Anyway, but anyway, it looks like the system requirements for this game are totally reasonable. There's nothing too crazy going on here, and performance, as far as I can tell, seems pretty solid. And it looks like I may die here, guys, because I was not paying attention to anything. So maybe that's a good place to end the video. Only slightly concerning thing I saw was the little frame time blip when I got my flashlight out in the tutorial section. Haven't seen anything else since then. Obviously, this is not the most thorough test. I wanted to test out some AMD GPUs, but I'm going to get my kids to gymnastics practice, so it is what it is, guys. At least we got several GPUs and systems tested out here. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If there is some interest in testing out other GPUs in this game, maybe some AMD stuff, let me know in the comment section. I will have to judge by, is this video getting a lot of traffic? Are people heavily interested in this game to see if it is worth the time investment on that? But do let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I hope all of you have an excellent day.